Welcome, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all today. My name is Joseph Thompson. And listen, why don't you guys join me in welcoming everyone at one of our physical locations and everyone who's watching online. Come on, let's give them a big block welcome. Hey, listen, I'm so honored to be here. You know, I love Pastor Joey and Lauren, and they're like, in a manner of speaking, they become like my kids, and I love what God is doing through them. And so every time I get to speak here at the Block Church, it's such an awesome privilege for me. And today, I sort of will date myself a little because I'm going to be talking about something that I think you begin to think about as you reach what I consider the end of local church ministry. I've been working in a local church for almost 40 years now. And now as I approach the end of that season, there are a few things that I've learned that I want to talk about today. So why don't you pray with me and then we'll get into the scriptures. Father God, I'm so humbled by the privilege that I have to divide the word of truth, to break the bread of life this morning. Speak to us from your heavenly place of thunder. Let your voice echo from between the wings of the cherubim so that your word is imprinted upon our hearts deeply. And let us not be hearers only, but doers, so that the world will know that our God reigns. You know, if you just lift up your feet and go with the current of culture, you'll probably end up where you don't want to be. Financially, relationally, at work. In fact, what I found in the scriptures is that Paul exhorts us in the book of Ephesians chapter 5 this way. He says, so be very careful how you live. Do not live like those who are not wise, but live wisely. Use every chance you have for doing good, because these are evil times. Paul could have been writing today. So do not be foolish, but learn what the Lord wants you to do. Okay, I need to break that down for a moment, because think about this. He says, be very careful how you live. And then he says, do not live like those who are not wise. So Paul is establishing right off the bat to this church at Ephesus, and this was the more mature church that he was writing to. He was establishing that wisdom is a prerequisite for living well. Now, all too often, we ask ourselves the question, what's the right thing to do? Or what's the legal thing to do? But the truth is, the better question to ask is, what's the wise thing to do? You see, in light of my past experience, my experience is not yours. In light of my current circumstances, my current financial state is not the same as yours. So what I do financially may be completely different from what you do, even though they are both right. So doing the right thing isn't the point. It's whether it's the wise thing to do. And in light of my future hopes and dreams, in light of what plans I have for my family, for my children, my kids are adults. So the plans that I have, if I decided to up and move to a different city, has zero bearing on my children. But some of you who have younger children would have to think through all of those processes. You'd have to decide about school zones. You'd have to decide about all the things that impact your children's future. So it's not what's the right thing to do. It's what's the wise thing to do in light of my past experiences, my current circumstances, and my future hopes and dreams. So here's what I want you to hear today. If you ask this question, and you do nothing about it, in light of my past experiences, current circumstances, future hopes and dreams, if you ask that question, what's the wise thing to do, and you do nothing about it, at least you've learned one thing about yourself. You've learned that you don't have your own best interest at heart. If you've chosen to ask that question but not respond, not do anything about it, you know that much. You see, Solomon wrote the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon. All of these are books about wisdom. They are books about living effective and fruitful lives. And the Bible actually says he was the wisest man that ever lived, the wisest and the wealthiest. So here's something that I find fascinating. The book of Proverbs in particular speaks largely about wisdom. And Solomon describes 4 different kinds of people in the book of Proverbs. So I want us to take a moment and go through all 4 of them so that we can locate ourselves in this equation and make a decision as to where we are. And then make a determination what we're going to do with that information. So the first kind of person that Solomon speaks about is the wise person. The wise person, in case you're wondering, is someone who's in tune with sound judgment, someone who's emotionally intelligent, someone who understands how their lives impact the lives of others, how they interact with others, how they live their lives from one day to the next. That's the wise person. So we won't spend too much time on that. It's pretty clear what that is. But there are 3 other options, and they are offensive. But as offensive as they may be to some of us, they are very real. You see, if you walk away from wisdom, you walk towards something else. And that something else is one of these 3. No one ever plans to fail. We just don't plan not to. That's the trouble. We don't plan to fail, but we don't plan not to fail. So you might ask, how do I plan not to fail? I'm glad you asked. That's why I'm here today. You see, the second kind of person that Solomon talks about in the book of Proverbs is the simple person. The thing is, the simple person lacks wisdom because they're naive. They're not wise, and they're not simple because they choose to be stupid or ignorant. No. They're simple and unwise because they're young and clueless. They lack experience, which is something that older people have. And experience is not found in the pages of books. Experience comes from living life one day to the next. That's how you amass and accumulate experience. If you've never planted a church, you may have read all the books about planting churches, but until you've had the experience, you have no clue. And I hear so many amens in all our locations today because you know how true that is. When you are part of something that's never been done before by you, and you get to experience it, that becomes something that is in your tool belt for the rest of your lives. You see, the great theologian Taylor Swift actually summed it up perfectly in her song, 15. She declared, when you're 15 and somebody tells you they love you, you're going to believe it. You see, you believe this when you're 15, not because you're dumb or stupid, but simply because you lack experience. So when someone at 15 tells you they love you, when you're 15 and they're 15, you believe it. The book of Proverbs, chapter 7, talks about the simple person. Once, while I was at the window of my house, I love how the book of Proverbs personalizes wisdom and foolishness as people. And it says, once, while I was at the window of my house, I looked out through the shutters and saw some foolish young men. I noticed one of them had no wisdom. He was walking down the street near the corner of the road leading to her house. It was the twilight of the evening. The darkness of the night was just beginning. Then the woman approached him, dressed like a prostitute and planning to trick him. She was loud and stubborn and never stayed at home. She was always out in the streets or in the city squares. Waiting around on the corners of the streets, she grabbed him and kissed him. Without shame, she said to him, I made my fellowship offering and took some of the meat home. Today, I've kept my special promises. So I have come out to meet you. I've been looking for you and have found you. I've covered my bed with colored sheets from Egypt. Apparently, Egyptian sheets are quite the rage. I've made my bed smell sweet with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let's make love until morning. Let's enjoy each other's love. My husband is not home. He's gone on a long trip. He took a lot of money with him and won't be home for weeks. Now pay attention to this. By her clever words, she made him give in. By her pleasing words, she led him into doing wrong. Wisdom would suggest that if you walk down this road, the end is destruction. There's a path that seems right onto a man, but the end thereof is the path of destruction. But because he has never had this experience before, because he's simple, her words entrap him. Her words, her clever words, make him give in. All at once, he followed her like an ox to the butcher, like a deer caught in a trap and shot through the liver with an arrow. I love how graphic Solomon is about this. Like a bird caught in a trap, he didn't know what he did would kill him. Now, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Don't let yourself be tricked by such a woman. Don't go where she leads you. She's ruined many good men, and many have died because of her. Her house is on the road to death, the road that leads down to the grave. Here's what I need you to understand about this passage. Solomon is describing a young man who thinks he's in for a good time. But he's actually like an ox being led to the slaughter. He's clueless, he's naive, he's simple. You see, the simple person responds to wisdom. If his friends or anyone had given him counsel in the moment concerning the decision he was about to make, his response would probably have been, nothing's going to happen. But the Bible actually says, can a man take fire to his body and not be burned? But the response of the simple person is nothing's going to happen, because they are so oblivious to what real life offers. They lack experience. They're naive. I can handle it. You're overreacting. How can you guarantee the future like that? Nothing's going to happen. How do you know with certainty that nothing is going to happen? I remember when I was in college, we all were these young 18, 19, 20-year-olds who loved the fast life. And we all told our parents, oh, we need transportation in college. We need motorcycles. But we'll buy small little motorcycles like mopeds and all. And our parents would say, how much were they? And our parents didn't care to check on those things. There was no internet in those days. So we just quote the figure for a really big motorcycle. Back in the day, the most popular bike on campus was the KH250, the Kawasaki 250. And that's a big machine, especially for a kid who weighs 125, 130 pounds. And we would buy these, and we would take them to campus, and too many of my friends, we did things like this. This is how simple we were. We would have races. The main road into campus was called Road 1. Yeah, we're very creative that way. We come up with great names. So Road 1 was this long straight road that stretched for about 2 miles. It was beautiful because it went uphill towards campus, and as you broke the hill, you'd see this incredibly beautiful vista in front of you. So we would line up our motorcycles and race down Road 1. And we'd do things like get up on the seat and kneel while we were throttling. And some daredevils would try and stand on the seat on a moving bike going 100 and something miles an hour. As you can imagine, many of us died. We were naive enough to think nothing's gonna happen. You know, so-and-so did it yesterday. We've all done this before. But that is what the person who lacks experience does. I have too many friends who had unprotected sex for the first time because they weren't Christ followers, and they got AIDS. It's not going to happen to me. Nothing's going to happen. It's the story of the simple. You see, our world is full of people who have been there and suffered the consequences. But it's like playing Russian roulette. And by the way, Russian roulette is a game only young, simple people play because they think nothing's going to happen. Parents overreact to our kids. We want to pick our kids' friends. We want to make sure that they're hanging out with the right people because we anticipate the future. If you're 15, and someone tells you they love you in school, someone with bad breath and no deodorant, you believe him. Why? Because you're 15. And when you're 15, that's what you do. That's why the old adage, youth is wasted on the young, rings so true. I remember when we were younger and in our late teens and early 20s, driving our jalopies that had no air conditioning down the road, and we'd see a bald old guy driving a Lamborghini but below the speed limit, and we'd think, man, that car is wasted on him. What we didn't realize was that if we had owned that car then, we probably would have ended up wrapped around a tree or under a semi somewhere, because we would have wanted to test the limits. Nothing will happen to me. Why? Because at 15, you haven't faced consequences. At 15, you don't know what it's like to lose a house, or to not be able to pay the bills, or to lose a job that's the source of income and sustenance for your whole family. At 15, you're wholly unfamiliar with the concept of other people suffering the consequences of your poor choices. So, if you're watching today at one of our locations and you're 21 or younger, you have an opportunity to both live like you're 21 and under, but also live with wisdom. So you can hang out at coffee shops with purple hair and skinny jeans all day, but you can also seek wisdom and godly counsel. Here's how. Here's your next step. Simple word of advice to those who identify with being simple. Don't trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. Because too many of us are so hungry for what we want now, in that moment we forget what we want most. And if we settle for what we want now, we may compromise our whole future and what we want. You see, that murmur that went through the crowd wasn't the simple people, it's the older people who wish someone had told them this when they were 21. So you're going to have to stop at every opportunity you have and ask this simple question. In light of my past experiences, current circumstances, and future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing for me to do? The third kind of person that Paul speaks, that Solomon speaks about, is the fool. The fool knows, the fool just doesn't care. You know that's going to hurt you, right? Yep. But you're still going to do it. Yeah, it's none of your business. Well, Solomon says you're a fool. I know what you're thinking. Some of you hear me say this and you're thinking, wow, I understand, I agree I'm a fool. That's the first thing you've said today that I agree with. But here's how Solomon says it. As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly. He doesn't end there. He goes on to say, a fool finds pleasure in wicked schemes. Let me explain to you what a fool looks like. I was watching a show called The World's Dumbest. Some of you are maybe familiar with that. So this was fascinating to me. So there was a kid, all this group of kids were on skateboards, and they were doing, I don't know what it's called, railing or whatever, but you jump up your skateboard onto a rail that's like 3 feet high and you slide down it and all that. I'm just too old to get any of that. But this is what was going on. And as is to be expected, at one point, one of these kids fell off the rail, fell onto his arm and broke his arm. And he was rushed to the ER, where he was patched up and put in a cast and all that. And the next day, he comes back to his friends, and his friends are egging him on to get back on the skateboard. You know where this story is going, don't you? He gets up on the skateboard, and he breaks the other arm. In other words, a fool calls vomit pleasure. That's what Solomon says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly. I know this is wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway. Now, we've all done, if you've lived any length of time, we've all done something foolish that we hope nobody knows or finds out about. We've all been fools in certain areas of our lives. You see, the cure for the simple person is time. You grow up and you learn from your personal experiences, or if you're wiser, from the experiences of those who've gone ahead of you. From the experiences of those who've lived longer than you and have walked through your season of life successfully. How do you know they've lived through your season of life successfully? Well, they're still alive. They've navigated your journey. So even if they made the same mistakes you made, they've come through it successfully, and they can tell you in retrospect what it cost them. So the cure for the simple person is time. The cure for the fool is tragedy. Many of us have learned that the hard way. Whether it's a personal injury, a loss of a home, the repossession of a car, your third or fourth divorce, whatever it is, many of us have learned the hard way, because as a dog returns to its vomit, so the fool repeats their folly. Here's what Solomon says. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. You see, your foolishness sadly blinds you to the fact that you're also selfish, because you don't consider the impact of your choices on others. The reality is, you simply live for yourself and for the pleasures of the moment. The fool does not acknowledge that his choices, while personal, are not private. They impact the lives of those around you. Again, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Who's the companion of fools? Fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, friends, co-workers, employees, employers. Those are the companions. Those are the people we live life with every day. So if you choose the path of foolishness, your choices ultimately will impact all the people around you. I remember many years ago, poetically, my lead pastor in Colorado Springs preached a sermon, best sermon I've ever heard him preach, that he titled, "So How Much Is Your Sin Going to Cost Me Anyhow?" Well, interestingly enough, he fell into sin, and it cost the church everything. It affected the church globally, and it certainly affected the local church in Colorado Springs, still till today. It was a church of 24,000 that's significantly smaller today. How much is your sin going to cost me anyhow? Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. The fourth kind of person that Solomon speaks to us about is the mocker or the scoffer. The mocker is the fool on steroids. The mocker is the fool who doesn't just know that what they do is wrong, but are going to go ahead and do it anyway. No. The mocker is the one who mocks those who are doing the wise thing. The mocker is critical, condescending. You're always off balance with the mocker. In fact, the mocker controls the conversation and always tries to come off as if they're the smartest person in the world. They control their world through cynicism, through condescension. And if you're the mocker listening to me this morning, you've probably already folded your arms and you're thinking, I'm going to have a word with this guy after service and tell him what I really think about him. You know, I've seen a lot of mockers. A while back, I saw a blog by a guy, this young black guy called Daddy Doing Work. That's the title of his blog. It's fascinating, young guy. But he put out a video of him doing his young daughter's hair. If you know anything about black hair, it's kind of difficult to braid and weave. It's a skill that you learn. And he was doing this. There were thousands of comments, and most of them were derogatory, negative, that he's been whipped. I can't use the word in public. He's been whipped. He's this, that, and the other. I mean, he was ridiculed. That no real black man would condescend to that his wife has beaten him into shape and all that. I mean, he's doing his daughter's hair. What an incredible moment of bonding and connecting with his own child. But that's what the mocker does. The mocker is the fool on steroids. Not only will they not do the right thing, they criticize and mock others who are doing the wise thing. Here's what Solomon has to say about the mocker. Whoever corrects a mocker invites insults. Whoever rebukes the wicked incurs abuse. Do not rebuke mockers or they will hate you. In other words, here's what Solomon is saying. Don't cast your pearl before swine. The mocker is not going to listen to what you have to say. Now, this is critical for us to understand because our journey will take us through all of these seasons. And unless you recognize where you are and locate yourself in this, you will not make the choice to be wise. You will not ask the question, in light of my past experiences, current circumstances, and future hopes and dreams, what's the wise thing for me to do? They don't listen. The mocker won't argue well. In fact, as soon as you bring up something that's negative about what they've said, they pounce. Their insecurity and arrogance or something in their past makes it such that they need to shame you to make themselves feel better. Here's how I like to say it. If you correct the simple, they won't get you. If you correct a fool, they will ignore you. If you correct a mocker, they will hate you. If you correct a wise person, they will thank you. You see, the wise seek understanding. The wise know what they don't know. And they're not afraid to listen to people who do know. The wise do not allow an overbloated sense of self get in the way of learning. Can I say, it's one of the things that I love most about Joey. I've never met a man, or seldom have I met a man, who is doing well at what God has called him to do. But he's constantly asking himself, in light of my current circumstances and past experience, what's the wise thing for me to do? Constantly reaching out. I mean, he calls me regularly to just run by me what's going on in his head and what questions he's asking. That kind of accountability is the kind of accountability that gives you longevity. Because that kind of accountability makes you wise. In fact, at the start of the book of Proverbs, Solomon personifies wisdom as a woman who's walking down the streets calling out and asking, who wants wisdom? Come and get it. Out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. She raises her voice in the public square. On top of the wall, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. How long will you who are simple love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? To the simple, wisdom asks, how long will you allow your poor judgment to drive your life? To the mocker, wisdom asks, how long will you mock and ridicule the truth while you continue to destroy your relationships with other people? To the fool, wisdom asks, how long will you continue to do the same things over and over again and expect different results? Your third failed marriage, your second bankruptcy, when will you learn? But wisdom declares, repent at my rebuke. Then I will pour out my thoughts to you. I will make known to you my teachings. Wisdom declares, but since you refuse to listen when I call, and no one pays attention when I stretch out my hand, since you disregard all my advice and do not accept my rebuke, I in turn will laugh when disaster strikes you. I will mock when calamity overtakes you. This is wisdom speaking. when calamity overtakes you like a storm, when disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind, when distress and trouble overwhelm you. Then they will call to me, says wisdom, but I will not answer. They will look for me, but will not find me, since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord. Since they would not accept my advice and spurned my rebuke, they will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. You see, my friends, there is no amount of money, no amount of counseling that can fix the principles of sowing and reaping. You eat the fruit of your ways. What you sow, you will reap. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them. We read that about the man going down the wrong road. And the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm. I love that. Thank God for that last sentence. You see, because the first chapter of the book of Proverbs is a synopsis of the entire book. It's pointing out to us the steps of the journey that we take. And I love the end of that journey. Whoever. Who's a whoever? You know who? Whoever. Everyone qualifies as a whoever. Whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm. Thank God for that. So what are the steps that we must take? Here's the first thing you need to realize. If you're a mocker, if you can identify that your choices in life closely resemble the choices of a mocker, you first must admit that you are not the smartest person in the room. If you're a fool, then you must start to care about the consequences of your choices and how your choices impact others. And if you're simple, you're not stupid. Your heart isn't evil. You just have to accept that you lack the experience to see all the necessary answers to direct your life effectively, and you need to seek wisdom from those around you. How? Simple, but not easy. You must ask the question, in light of my past experiences, current circumstances, and future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing for me to do? And for some of you, you've just started this journey. This may even be your first time in church. You were invited by someone, or you gave someone a lift because they said they'd give you gas money. We're glad you're here. The reality is, you start this by asking the question, in light of my current circumstance, what is your current circumstance? Well, you're outside of a relationship with the Savior, the only one who matters most. So if you would, at all of our physical locations, would you stand to your feet? And in fact, if you are watching online, sitting in your living room eating popcorn, I'd love for you to stand too. Just put down that drink or that popcorn for just a moment. And I want you to, if you identify with this specifically, raise your hand. If you would say to me, I see myself in one of those qualities, and it is not the quality of wisdom, then I want you to raise your hand right where you are, in all of our locations, and I want you to pray this prayer out loud with me, meaning it from the depths of your heart. Say something like this. Say, Father, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, I acknowledge that I am a sinner in need of your grace. I have lived my life for myself. Now I choose to live it for you. I choose to put others above me. I want to live the life of a wise person. And wisdom dictates that I invite Jesus into my story to guide and direct my path. I recognize that according to Paul, I must be very careful how I live. I must not live like those who are unwise. So I choose wisdom today. I acknowledge that Jesus died for my sins. I accept his sacrifice. And I declare that he is Lord of my life. And let's celebrate those decisions right now for everyone who prayed that prayer. Come on, guys. I want you to know that today you transferred from death onto life. You are a disciple, a follower of Christ. God bless.